If you were alone on the planet, what would you do? You must have thought about this once at least in your life. You always wanted to move around while other people are standing still for a while, or they all disappear. But have you ever imagined that if all the people disappeared, everything would be different? Dams would collapse, nuclear reactors would be ruined, and companies would have no one to work in it. Everything would be very strange and wasted, not like you imagined. If you can't imagine the situation, you should watch the show, The Last Man on Earth. One of the most powerful fantasy series released in 2015. It starts with our main character, Phil, while he is in a very large bus, which we soon realize is not a bus but a huge van shaped like a bus. He starts calling out for living people or for anything or anyone who is moving around in the world, and no one answers him. Then we see him writing on the street on a big sign that there is a living person in Tucson, which is a really nice idea, so if someone sees it, they can go there. He continues on his way to Tucson after crossing out the state on the map and realizing that no one is still alive. When he arrives in Tucson, he chooses the most luxurious house, decides to stay there, and starts moving all of his package from the bus. We find that he have Oscar rewards, paintings, antiques, and anything modern or rare that he can get his hands on. Then he starts to fall asleep and says that he's just returned from a trip to the country and he didn't find anyone there, so he decided to live in this house. Millionaire's life is really awesome. He puts on the house owner's pajamas after washing them, then realizes that the flusher is bad, so he gets water bottles and uses them in the bathroom. Then he goes to the supermarket half naked, breaks the door with the lock, and goes to get what he wants and makes the place very messy because no one will judge him. As he passes by, he sees a standing mannequin and he gets surprised because he has not seen a woman for months and he is very tired. And then we see him taking some drinks from the place and drink it all at home. And then he plays bowling. Then he throws the bowling ball on aquariums and breaks them. Then we see him takes a very expensive car and puts gasoline cans in it and let another car moves and crashes it and explodes. He is bored and looking for anything to amuse him. Then we see him watching the movie Cast Away, which, by the way, if you want us to summarize it, tell us in the comments. He was a guy like him sitting on an island by himself. And he says, "No way, I'm definitely not going to talk with a ball like him." And Phil goes to celebrate his birthday alone at night, remembering the last birthday he had with his parents. After 5 months, we see his beard is long, his house is full of garbage and plastic cans, and he himself looks moldy and doesn't care about his hygiene. Then we see him walking around the house and he is bored about everything, his bathroom and the bottles around it, and he decides to go downstairs and make a circular pool area, cut it up, and sit on it like a toilet. Then we see him making a big swimming pool full of alcohol and sitting, sleeping, waking up, and drinking in it. Then we see him at the bar doing the same thing Tom Hanks did in his movie, and he brings a lot of balls, a foot, a basket, a hoop, a tennis ball, a badminton ball, and everyone has a face. He gives them names and talks to them about how hard life is and how he's a lonely man and how he wants only one woman to stay with him, and he will never complains again or anything. And then he gets up at night and takes one of the balls with him in the car, and they stand in front of the mannequin in the trouser shop. He says, "She's the one I told you about and I want to talk to her. But no, don't tell me that I should talk to her. Maybe she's not single." And then he says, "Well, don't say I am coward. I'll go and talk to her." Then he goes to the mannequin and says, "How are you? I wanted to talk to you for a while, but I'm embarrassed and don't know how to approach to you. I like your outfit, by the way." Then he gets closer and kisses her and says, "I'm sorry I kissed you suddenly. We should have gotten to know each other first." Then, while pulling her arm, her hand dislocated, he felt like an idiot, got annoyed about what happened, and decided to end his life. And the next day we see him in the mountain. He wrote on a huge rock his name and that his grave is here, and the date and time of his death. He says goodbye to all his friends and tells them that the Tom Hanks movie was real. And then he gets into his car and decides that he will drive into the rock on which it is marked until the car breaks down and dies. But as he's driving toward the rock, he spots something and stops at the last second. Then he gets out and sees smoke coming from far away, but he can't see it, which means there's someone there. Then he goes over there and finds a tent, a fire, and a female clothes. And he can't believe his eyes, and his heart is full of joy and surprise that there is someone living, and most likely, a woman. Then he faints and falls to the ground. When he wakes up, he finds an actress he loves, and she asks him, "Are you okay? What are you doing? How can I help you and what made you fall like that?" He wakes up from the dream and he finds another one and she says, "Did you piss yourself?" He says, "No, I was just swimming and I came here." Then she pulls a gun out of her bag and he says, "What are you doing? I'm a normal human being. Are you going to kill the last man on earth or what?" She says, "Look at yourself." He says, "I'm sorry, I've pissed myself. I've spent 2 years without seeing a human being. So my psychological state isn't all right. Let's open a new page, but first put the gun down." Then she says, "I am sorry." Then he takes her and to show her his apartment, and she goes with him and says, "The traffic light is red. What are you doing?" He says, "It's okay, there isn't a single creature on the planet." She says, "Even though you can't cross while the traffic light is red, yeah?" And she made him stay in the next one. Then she enters his house and he shows her every corner of it. She says, "Did you steal all these paintings?" He says, "No, I didn't steal anything. There's no one in the world." She says, "Yes, you did. And what's this garbage and mess? You didn't think to fix the water instead of living like an animal? And what is all this garbage? I will try not to judge you." He said, "You should go back to your camp." Phil started to get annoyed with Carol, her presence, her silly comments, and her normal behavior, as if it's not strange that he is the first man she had seen in a long time. He returns her back to her place and walks quickly. The next day we see her in his place cleaning, and he says, "Hey, how you could enter my house like that?" She says, "We have a lot of work to do, cleaning this mess and fixing the flasher." She said, "Let's go to the supermarket." And then they went to the supermarket and parked the car to get out, but she said, "This is a handicapped park." He said, "Are you serious?" He said, "The whole earth is parking for who wants to park." She insisted on her opinion, so he said, "I want a closer place." He went inside the supermarket with the car and said, "What do you think?" And then she says, "Why did you do that?" And she lectures him until he gets tired of it and goes to the parking. At night, he goes to the bar and the balls he had made before and tells them what happened and says, "I'm so annoyed by her presence. I couldn't believe that if I met a human being, I would be so annoyed." Then the next day he hears a noise and finds her bringing all her things and sitting in the house next to him. He says, No, houses are too big. You don't have to choose this one." She says, "I like this house, and we have to marry and have kids so the humans don't extinct." He said, "If you are the last woman on earth, I won't marry you." She said, "I'm already the last one on earth, and I don't like you either. I'm doing it for our kind." Then he walks away and leaves her, and she shows up while he's in the pool. He says, "What are you doing?" "It's my house. You can't enter it without permission." She ignored what he said, and she said, "Let's fix the flasher. Look how sweet is my tomato crop." She eats them in front of him and says, "Very delicious and natural. When did you last eat a vegetable or something natural?" Then she walks away and says, "If you don't work with me, you won't eat with me." Phil goes into her garden at night and eats all the tomatoes there, and wakes up in the morning with tomatoes on his face, and she says, "Did you eat the tomatoes?" "I don't need any help from you." And she walks away, annoyed and staying up all night trying to fix the flasher problem. And then we see him in the morning apologizing to her while she looks very tired, and she says, "I'm going to dig a hole on my swimming pool too and make a toilet like yours." And forget. The whole idea about human existence. We don't have to do anything. I don't have to plant tomatoes or do anything. He leaves her and walks away feeling very guilty, and then goes to the water tank and tries to fix the water, and he starts watering the garden. She wakes up the next day, and when she sees what happened, she feels better. He says, "I don't know anything about that. I don't even know who did it." And she invited him for the dinner and said, "I told you that deep down you're a good person, but you didn't believe me." He apologizes and says, "It's not as bad as I imagined." And then she says, "When are we going to get married?" He said, "Why?" She said, "The first child on earth will not be a bastard. We have to get married." He said, "There is no one. What difference does it make?" She said, "It matters to me." And he left. He came back and said, "All right, don't get angry on me. I'm going to marry you." Then he gets on his knee and says, "Will you marry me?" She said, "Yes." He said, "Are you happy?" She said, "Yes." I didn't expect it at all. And then we see Phil and Carol in the platform talking, and he says, "It's a little old-fashioned." And she says, "It's still beautiful and I love it." She opens the door to the church after the ceremony, and Phil finds a lot of people waiting for him. And he's surprised and says, "Isn't she the last woman in the world? I am stuck with her?" He wakes up and finds that it was just a nightmare, and comes downstairs to find Carol saying, "Hey, I brought you food." She sits down with him and says, "Come take out your shitty magazines so we can eat." They start eating, and she says, "It's pasta, and instead of meatballs, I gave you raisin. I hope you like it." And then he eats it, and it tastes horrible, and she tries to eat it afterward and says, "What the hell, it's very bad." Then she says, "I've arranged all the details of the wedding. I'll take care of everything. I don't want you to worry about anything, but I want you to get the 2 rings. Is this hard?" He says, "No, it's the easiest thing in the world." Phil goes off and makes popcorn with a fire poker and does every weird thing he can to celebrate his last day as a single. And Carol gets on his case and says, "Is that what you're doing? Playing with fire?" She walks away, and then he comes to the church and finds her in a wedding dress, and he stands in front of her, and she says a lot of things while playing music on a tape she made. And after she's done, she says, "Thank you, Carol. This is Phil's turn." Phil said some sweet, simple words, and then she says, "Let's sit down for a while because I left more space on the tape thinking you'd say more than that." Then she says, "Where are the rings?" He says, "I forgot them." She says, "What the fuck? That's the only thing I asked you to answer." "You're really joking, and I don't care." She left him, walked away in her dress, took the wedding car, and walked off in a huff. Then he goes after her and says, "Are you inside? I'm worried about you, and if you don't open the door, I'll break it down." He breaks the door down and walks in to find decorations and a beautiful tart, and he says, "Tart, what's that? What's that?" And then he finds a lot of things she have done, and he is embarrassed and felt guilty, so he says, "I am really sorry. Don't be angry with me. I didn't like you. But that's it. We'll do what we have to do. What is the point of life if there is no one to live with? I will make up for all the shitty things I did." And then she says, "I can't believe I'm marrying the President of the United States." And he says, "What president?" She says, "There's no other president candidates, and I voted for you." Then he wakes up the next day and plays around the house, and then Carol comes in and he says, "Come play with me. I will teach you all this crap." And started playing with him and breaking things, and he started teaching her the habits he'd acquired over time, and she is happy to share them with him. Then one day, they were driving away from the supermarket, happy and talking, when they ran into a car and crashed it. Phil came down quickly, not believing that anyone was alive, until he saw someone coming down to talk to him, and he couldn't believe his eyes. Then we see Phil standing there, shocked by the beauty of the woman in front of him, and he says, "Damn it, you're coming to show up now?" I've been there since the beginning of the series, and Carol comes down and says, "What the hell? Someone else is on the ground." Afterward, they all check on each other and stay away from Phil's car, which suddenly exploded. Thankfully, they were far away from it at the time. They get into her limousine and take her home and say, "Are you sure you're okay?" And she says, "I'm fine." And then she said, "I'm glad I'm not the last one on Earth. I can't believe I saw all your signs and your talk about living in Tucson and decided to come. You know, I've been here for 2 weeks." He said, "You've been here before, Carol?" She said, "Yes, but I didn't know the address. You were supposed to write exactly where do you live in Tucson." And then Carol said, "I wish you were here 2 days ago. We would have invited you to our wedding." Phil said, "If she had been here, there would have been no wedding at all, but it's what it is." And then she says, "Have you already got married? You're not wasting any time at all." Carol says, "Well, the world was on our shoulders and we have to bring back the humankind." And then Phil says, "You know what? We can just close the window and get away from Carol." And he closes it and starts talking to her. And then they get home and she says, "What's all this paintings? Isn't it a Van Gogh?" Carol says, "Phil stole it all." He says, "I didn't steal anything." Carol said, "Why don't you come stay with me for a while? My house is across the street." She said, "You're not staying at home together?" She said, "No, Phil is stinky with a big toilet in the swimming pool and a lot of plastic and weird magazines." Phil said, Okay, she is new. We don't have to embarrass me in front of her, and she needs to rest now." Before she left, she said, "I'm so happy, by the way. I never thought I'd see another human being again," Phil said. "Oh, you are so cute. You need a big hug," he said. Then she came back the next night and they had dinner ready for her so they could sit and talk. She tastes Carol's food and she finds it very bad. Then Phil comes down from above with shaved beard, and they all look at each other in surprise. And they say, "Wow, you look like Tarantino." He says, "Is it bad or what?" They said, "No, it's not bad, but the first one you looked older, but now you look a little bit foolish." Then he said thank you, and they started talking a lot. Phil was very upset that Melissa was doing everything and saying everything that he hoped Carol would say, or that there was nothing wrong with her, which he didn't like about Carol. Then she tells them that she used to be married, but her husband cheated on her with a policewoman, and since then, she doesn't want to get married again. They said, "How can someone like you be cheated on?" He said, "I hate cheating, and it's in Carol's favor." She said, "It makes sense. I don't think anyone would cheat on Carol." And then Carol says, "This drink makes me feel strange. I'm just going to take Phil upstairs." She said, "Okay, I was going to leave anyway." Phil felt upset that he is going with Carol. At night, he dreams of Melissa coming into his room, and then he wakes up and finds himself with Carol. Then we see him the next day playing sports in front of the door, and he says, 290, 291, 293. I'm stopping here because that's a special number and I love it. And then she says, "Well done." And he says, "It isn't my best performance, but it's okay. Tell me how you're doing. Come on, I'll give you a surprise." Then he takes her and shows her a new car. What do you think? This is a substitute for your limousine. It's not the best substitute, but it's the only one I've found for now. She says, "Thank you, I don't know what to say." And then Carol says, "What's that?" He says, "I'm giving her a gift to make up for her car we have crashed." She says, "Wow, very generous and manly. Well, aren't you going to fix the door you broke?" He goes to ask permission from Melissa and says, "I won't be late. I will finish it quickly and come back." Then we see Carol talking to her friend about the photos of the wedding and that there are no photos, so she just draws pictures and says, "You think I'm crazy, don't you?" She says, "No, not at all. You are very sweat." And then they're joking around and Phil is fixing the door and Melissa comes out of nowhere. He says, "I miss you. Do you want to do anything?" She said, "Like what?" He said, "Come on, let's have a couple of drinks." She said, "Okay," and went on to drink. After a while, she got drunk with him and told him that she really needs a man and that she hasn't been around a man for a long time. He was very happy to hear that. But in the end, she apologized to him because he was married, and he said, "No, I'll call Carol about something and come over." He was going to break up with Carol at that time so that she wouldn't be an issue between him and Melissa, but he found her making a souvenir for them and said to hang it on the door after she fixed it. She keeps telling him that she loves him and that he is taking care of her and always has her back. When he hears that he feels so guilty, he leaves her and walks away and breaks down the door, in order to try not to let her get attached more to him and make him feel even more guilty when he walks away from her, because it's only a matter of time before he walks away from her. Afterwards, we see a car speeding down the highway. Then, a man gets out and sees the word Tucson written on a sign. He continues on his way, mostly towards Tucson, and then we see the three of them staying up late at night talking and just being bored because there is nothing to do. After Carol gets up to get nuts, Melissa tells Phil, "I'm so sorry for what I said last night." And he says, "Never mind, I'm glad you spoke up." She says, "I hope Carol doesn't find out." He says, "No, of course, don't worry, it won't happen." Then we see Carol at night trying to get Phil to get pregnant, and he's not happy and doesn't want to do that with her. The next day, we see Phil knocking on Melissa's door and saying, "Hey, what do you think of my outfit today?" She says, "It looks weird and old, but it's okay." He said, "I wanted to see you and talk to you about wanting to colonize the world again and all that." She said, "That's nice, but what does that have to do with me? I can't help in that." He said, "No, you can help in a lot of ways, I will tell you later, but I want to know your first opinion." She said, "I'm fine, but let me have my breakfast first, and then we'll talk about it." He said, "Okay, I'll go to Carol's and come back another time." He goes to Carol's and sits down and says, "I asked myself a question that made me feel sick. How can our children marry each other if we are going to save humankind? I have to have other childs with Melissa." She said, "Oh, just say so, honey, that you want to have a child with Melissa." He said, "No, I don't want to. I'm disgusted with the idea. But there's no other solution, unfortunately." If you are satisfied that our children marry each other and have a handicapped children, say so, she said. No, I am not satisfied, but this is not your reason. You just want to sleep with her. I know. Don't lie to me. You're an asshole and it's my fault for even talking to you. We are done. Then she kicks him out, and then we see him go home, upset, only to find himself in front of Melissa, knocking his door and saying, "What have you said to Carol? She came over and told me, if you want a man, go buy one from the shop. Don't mess with my man. Did you tell her what I said when I was drunk?" He said, "I said it unwillingly." She said, "You screwed it hard. I was hoping to have a best friend, but I don't have a chance anymore." He said, "You can have me as your best friend. Let's have lunch together today." But she left him and walked away, and he was upset and felt that he ruined everything and that the two women is no longer available. He decided to fix what he had done, so he planned a party at night in the neighborhood, and then he invited them. He tells them, "We have to make up, guys. We can't keep doing this. I am the last man in the world." But in the meantime, we see the other guy in the car driving very fast towards Tucson. If you want to know who is this guy, where he comes from, what he does, and what will happen, let us know in the comments and we'll summarize the rest of the episodes for you.